and welcome to our commemorative events, not quite ready for prime time players, history of the Daughters of the American Revolution. The year is 1876, a little over 10 years after the end of the Civil War, the middle of the Industrial Revolution. Our country was going fast and furious. We had taken manifest destiny for all we could get out of it, and we were going full speed ahead, always looking forward, always driving ourselves faster into the future. But 1876 changed all that. At that time, on May 10th, 1876, they had the Centennial Expedition in Philadelphia, which honored our 100th anniversary, our first 100 years. And at that, we went to the exposition, like 1 million of us went to the exposition, and we looked at all the different exhibits and things that were going on. And the one thing that really caught our heart was a room called the Colonial Kitchen. It was an 1876 version of what a 1776 kitchen would have looked like during the Revolution. It had spinning wheels and costumed performers and what have you. And we looked at this and we thought, you know what, we're losing everything. It tugged our heartstrings and our souls. And it started something called the Colonial Revival Movement, which gathered a group of like people who were interested in our history and wanted to preserve our history. And that was the beginning of something called the Sons of the American Revolution, who wanted to honor their fathers and grandfathers who had fought in the American Revolution. Well, the daughters, I say the daughters, we women wanted to do the same thing. And so we asked if we could join the Sons of the American Revolution. And they put it to vote on May 10, 1890. They said nope. And we said, bummer. And we got a little tiffed because we too wanted to celebrate our families. And a woman named Mary Smith Lockwood wrote a letter to the Washington Post. She was an author, she was the widow of a Union soldier, and she was a big women's rights advocate in 1890. And she wrote a thing about, were there no mothers of the Revolution? She wrote about a woman named Hannah Arnett, who had helped her husband talk people into joining the revolution when he couldn't do it, but she shamed the councilmen and the selectmen of her town into joining. So she played a part of the revolution. And Mrs. Lockwood ended her letter with, what do we do with Hannah Arnett? You know, do we just forget her? Well, the next day, all the women read her article, and they wanted to unite and start something new and different. And they said, oh, heck with the men. So, a group of women, Mary Smith Lockwood, Mary Desha, Ellen Walworth, and Eugenia Washington, got together. And on October 1st, 1890, at Mrs. Lockwood's home, they had the first meeting of the Daughters of the American Revolution with 18 women, 11 who actually joined, and they were able to get $33 put into the bank. That was the beginning. And after the meeting, they went and got Mrs. Harrison, Carolyn Harrison, the president's wife, and they asked her, could you please be our figurehead? And she said, well, okay, if I don't have to do too much. Well, Mrs. Harrison became our first president general, and those are always the last words because, of course, as anyone knows, she had a lot to do. So that's the beginning of the Daughters of the American Revolution.
Between 1891 and 1899, the first meetings of the DAR were held in the home of Elliot Campbell, the vice president presiding, who literally welcomed the National Society into her home in Washington, D.C. From 1891 to 1893, the National Society rented office space in a building located at 1505 Pennsylvania Avenue. Next, the Washington Loan and Trust Building served as headquarters for the DAR, which in 1902 they were leasing for $181.50 a month. The DAR Museum was founded in 1890 as a repository for family treasures. Today, the museum contains over 30,000 historical relics. In 1898, the U.S. Army appointed DAR member Dr. Anita Newcomb McGee as acting assistant surgeon in charge of nurses. She organized the DAR hospital corps, Army Nurse Corps, and served as the NSDAR's first librarian general. The DAR hospital corps certified 1,081 nurses for service during the Spanish-American War, and later funded pensions for many of those nurses whom the government did not fund. During the Spanish-American War, DAR purchased the ship's tender for the USS Missouri to be used as a hospital launch for transporting the wounded from shore to ship. Here are a few of the DAR members from this time period that you might recognize. Jane Addams, founder of Hull House in Chicago, a Nobel Prize recipient. Susan B. Anthony, suffrage and women's rights advocate. Clara Barton, founder of the Red Cross. The DAR Library opened to the general public in 1900. Berry College in Georgia was founded in 1902 to provide a high school education for rural youth and became the first approved DAR school. The school became a college in 1926. Other schools approved by the DAR during the early 1900s were Cross North School in North Carolina, which gave children from the Appalachian Mountains and foothills a home while they attended public school. Hillside School in Massachusetts was founded in 1901 as a rural home for boys who were orphaned or otherwise without a home or family. It now provides a structured and supportive environment for students with learning disabilities. Hindleman Settle School in Kentucky was founded in 1902 to provide an educational opportunity for the youth of the Appalachian Mountains. Its major educational emphasis today is its work with students with dyslexia. And last on the lighter but decisively historic note, in 1905, the Flintlock and Powderhorn chapter of Rhode Island presented the NSDAR Continental Memorial Hall an 18th century bronze eagle lectern, which was used in all important early DAR ceremonies and at Continental Congress. It was on the platform when President Woodrow Wilson spoke at the 25th Continental Congress in 1916 and is still in use today. It has been used for the last 3 presidential inaugural luncheons following the oath of office.
1910 to 1919. In 1910, President William Howard Taft received a special gift from the New Jersey Daughters. It was a chair made from the wood of the English frigate Augusta, which exploded and sank in the Battle of Red Banks during the Revolutionary War. There she remained until the New Jersey Daughters raised her for the purpose of historic preservation. Many of her timbers were used to craft a magnificent chair for President Taft. He said that as long as he was in office, the chair would remain. Mysteriously, though, it became missing, a true DAR mystery. During World War I, one of DAR's less conventional relief efforts was its campaign to re-chickenize France. In the wake of France's poultry shortage, the Daughters collected dimes and quarters. In return, contributors were given buttons saying, "I have a chicken in France." After the war, the DAR raised funds to restore a small village in France. More than $130,000 was raised. Famous daughters: Jane Delano, chairman of the Red Cross Nursing Service, World War I. Ellen Fairchild, World War I nurse killed in battle. Her grave was recently marked by President Lyndon Johnson Young. Anna M. Jarvis, founder of Mother's Day in the United States. And Belva Lockwood, lawyer and first woman to practice before the United States Supreme Court.
The Roaring Twenties, or the Jazz Age, 1920 to 1929. In 1920, the Daughters built a second building, the Administration Building, to connect with Memorial Continental Hall. November 12, 1921, Armistice Day. The 5 principal naval powers of the world at that time, United States, Great Britain, Italy, France, and Japan, along with several others, convened at Memorial Continental Hall to discuss disarmament, as well as issues in the Pacific and Far East. The agreements they reached made history as the first arms limitation treaty signed. As a result, the U.S. Department of Interior designated Memorial Continental Hall a National Historic Landmark in 1973. In 1923, the Daughters became the only society to sponsor work on Ellis Island for those who were detained there. The Daughters provided cloth, yarn, crochet, and embroidery supplies that helped the immigrants pass the time, and also provided much-needed items for their families, like neckties, belts, scarves, and rugs. From 1923 to 1940, DAR contributed almost $230,000 to support the misplaced thousands at Ellis Island. In 1924, the Daughters' membership was 142,000 ladies. On June 23, 1928, the DAR broke ground for a new hall, the Constitution Hall. Mrs. Calvin Coolidge laid the cornerstone for the building on October 30, 1928, using the trowel that George Washington used to lay the cornerstone at the U.S. Capitol in 1793.
Facts of the 1930s Depression era. In 1931, the Star-Spangled Banner is adopted as the official national anthem. In 1927, artist Grant Wood was commissioned to create a stained glass window in the Veterans Memorial Coliseum in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Unhappy with the quality of domestic glass sources, he used glass made in Germany. The local chapter of the DAR complained about the use of a German source for a World War I memorial. In retaliation, after the DAR attacked him as un-American, in 1932, artist Grant Wood painted a satire look of the ladies of the NSDAR entitled Daughters of Revolution. Some DAR women saw this painting as scandalous, while others loved the satire. The painting gave a much-needed laugh for Americans during the Great Depression. In 1936, the American Indian Subcommittee was founded by the DAR to help assist and provide financial and educational assistance to Native American youth. The DAR chose the Chippewa Indian School and Pecan College as outlets for our assistance. In 1936, Marian Anderson, an African-American singer, requested a booking at Constitution Hall. The DAR refused the booking due to a white performer-only policy. In 1939, she again petitioned the DAR to make an exception to the white performers-only policy, which the DAR declined. In response, Eleanor Roosevelt resigned her membership in the DAR. The DAR later apologized to Anderson and welcomed her to Constitution Hall on a number of occasions. In 1939, the President General chose the Penny Pine Program as one of the Golden Jubilee national projects. Each state was to have a memorial forest, and each chapter was to pledge 1 acre of pine seedlings. These pines would be sold to organizations and individuals for a penny each to help share the cost of the project, hence the popular term penny pine.
DAR in the 1940s. Throughout the history, DAR has worked to support active duty military personnel and also to provide relief to those affected by armed conflict. This demonstrates Daughters' willingness to tailor their efforts to fit the situation. During World War II, DAR gave the American Red Cross the free use of any and all space in Constitution Hall for their needs. The basement of the building was turned into a day nursery for enlisted men's wives who had to return to work. Other rooms in the building were used for prisoner of war office, a war service center to entertain servicemen. The DAR helped the Red Cross Blood Donor Project by contributing $148,582 for equipment such as ambulances and blood donor mobile units. Some 112,000 DAR members volunteered over 26 million hours for the Red Cross. The DAR also provided 197,000 soldiers with care packages and sponsored all 89 crews of landing craft infantry ships. In movies, newspapers, photographs, and posters and articles, the Rosie the Riveter campaign stressed the public need for women to enter the workforce. Her prototype was actually created in 1942 and featured on a poster for the Westinghouse Power Company, and it was under the headline of "We Can Do It." The Saturday Evening Post published a cover image by the artist Norman Rockwell portraying Rosie with a flag in the background and a copy of Adolf Hitler's racist tract Mein Kampf under her feet. One of our chapter members, Gertrude Banks, was a Rosie the Riveter. And so is Margaret Bloom, who is a visitor daughter with us today.
The first decade of rock and roll, 1950, 1959. In 1950, the Memorial Continental Hall Auditorium was converted to house the DAR library. In 1952, the DAR reversed its 1939 decision to ban African-American contralto Marian Anderson from singing at Constitution Hall. On March 14, 1953, Marian Anderson sings to an unsegregated audience as part of the American University Concert Series. In 1953, the DAR erected a memorial bell tower at the Washington Memorial Chapel in the heart of Valley Forge National Park. The tower houses a carillon of 80 bells. Dedications and memorial plaques honoring America's military cover the interior of the tower. On December 28, 1954, Congress officially changes the wording of the Pledge of Allegiance, adding "under God." In 1955, the DAR petitioned Congress to set aside September 17th through the 23rd annually to be dedicated for the observance of Constitution Week. The resolution was later adopted by the U.S. Congress and signed into public law on August 2nd, 1956 by President Dwight D. Eisenhower. On April 22, 1958, the DAR, after a long, sharp debate, voted to urge the United States to withdraw from the United Nations, which the government did not. 75 members walked out in disgust during this debate. At the same Continental Congress, the daughters voted against mixed marriages among the races and called for a quick end to foreign aid and for withdrawing recognition of Russia and its satellites. The DAR also made a resolution to express criticism of the National Council of Churches of Christ in America for what the DAR termed its political, socialistic, and one-world activities, which drew protests that the DAR was invading the field of religion.
(1960 to 1969). In 1961, with the effort of the Arkansas State NSDAR, the Louisiana Purchase State Park was opened. It was the Arkansas daughters who originally found the old traces of the original borders and who worked at finding property rights and papers, all which led up to the state park. In 1962, the DAR denounced the newly formed Earth Day as subversive communistic plot. We would later change our minds. We now promote conservation and include a conservation moment in our minutes. On October the 15th, 1963, Richard Avedon, American preeminent editorial photographer, shot the famous photo, The Generals of the Daughters of the Revolution, in Washington, D.C. The photo is a black and white study of the various NSDAR ladies who were waiting to attend Continental Congress, all unaware that the photo was being taken. The picture became quite famous during the 60s as a social commentary. The picture is over here on one of the posters too. The photographer later gave the photo to the Black Forest Inn and it hung on the wall in the bar. The photographer, years later, a regular patron, Ellis Nelson, was sitting on his favorite stool in the bar, pulled out a revolver, and opened fire on the photograph. He put 3 holes in the photo. The photo was later moved to a museum down the street from the bar. In 1964, Marian Anderson chose Constitutional Hall as the place to launch her Farewell American tour. In 1965 was the NSDAR Diamond Jubilee. On October 15, 1966, Congress enacts the National Historic Preservation Act and an act to establish a program for the preservation of additional historical properties throughout the nation. On August 13, 1967, Joan Boaz, a folk singer, was denied permission to perform at Constitutional Hall due to her anti-war activities. She responded to this by having a free concert at the base of the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C., resulting in over 3,000 people attending. In 1967, the DAR began awarding medals to the ROTC students in recognition of the ROTC as an important program that prepares trained officers for the service in the armed forces. Famous ladies who joined in the 1960s: Ima Hogg, philanthropist, patron of the arts, daughter of Governor James Hogg, and she was responsible for the Stinson House in Quitman. Virginia Mayo, actress, dancer, comedian, and Nina McLemore, fashion designer, founder of Liz Platforms in 1969. Excuse me. To 1979. In 1970, the bicentennial renewed interest in the past and the movie Roots inspired the enthusiasm for genealogy. Crafts were revived like quilting, macrame, and furniture, refinishing, and launched the natural foods movement. During this time, the NSDAR also encouraged any new chapter to pick a name after an influential female from the Revolutionary period. In 1972, the NSDAR contributed $200,000 to the restoration of Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The DAR totally funded the furnishings for the Governor's Council chambers and the Committee of the Assembly's room on the second floor with authentic 18th century pictures of furniture, pieces of furniture. In addition, DAR established the Rose Garden at Independence Hall. In 1976, bicentennial national theme was Preserve Your Heritage. In 1976, permanent works of art were commissioned by the NSDAR to adorn the walls and ceilings within the U.S. Capitol building. The project consists of 16 murals, 32 vignettes, and 16 medallions, portraits depicting history events in U.S. history. In October 1977, Karen Batchelor Farmer, now known as Karen Batchelor of Detroit, Michigan, was admitted as the first known African-American member of the DAR. Within 26 months, she had traced her family history back to the American Revolution. She was surprised she could go to the DAR. Batchelor traced her ancestry to Patriot William Ford, who served in the colonial militia in Pennsylvania. Batchelor was contacted by the Ezra Parker chapter in Royal Oak, Michigan, who invited her to join their chapter. She officially became DAR member 623128. In December 1977, Batchelor's admissions as the first known African-American member of DAR sparked international interest after it was featured in a story on page 1 of the New York Times. On April 17, 1979, the last change was made to the DAR seal. The seal has remained unchanged since then. Famous women in the 1970s that joined: Rosalind Smith Carter, First Lady; Julie Nixon Eisenhower, daughter of President Richard M. Nixon; Lee Kessler, writer, playwright, television actress; Margaret Seddon, medical doctor and astronaut. Thank you.
The 1980s. In March 1984, a controversy arose when Lena Lorraine Santos Ferguson said she had been denied membership in a Washington, D.C. chapter of the DAR because she was black. The reporter Ronald Kessler quoted Ferguson's two white sponsors, Margaret M. Johnston and Elizabeth E. Thompson, as saying that although Ferguson met the lineage requirements and could trace her ancestry to Jonah Gay, fellow DAR members told him that Ferguson was not wanted because she was black. Sarah M. King, the President General of the DAR, told Kessler that the DAR's chapters have autonomy in determining members. Asked if she thought this acceptable, she said, "Well, if you give a dinner party and someone insisted on coming that you didn't want, what would you do?" Being black is not the only reason why some people have not been accepted into chapters. There are other reasons: divorce, spite, neighbors' dislike. I would say being black is very far down the line. There are a lot of people who are troublemakers. You wouldn't want them in there because they could cause some problems. After her comments were reported, the D.C. City Council threatened to revoke the DAR's real estate tax exemption. King said that Ferguson should have been admitted and her application to join the DAR was handled inappropriately. Representing Ferguson pro bono, lawyers from the Washington law firm of Hogan and Hartson began working with King to develop positive ways to ensure that blacks would not be discriminated against when applying for membership. The DAR changed its bylaws to bar discrimination on the basis of race or creed. King announced a resolution to recognize the heroic contributions of black patriots in the American Revolution. As a result of the Washington Post story, Ferguson, a retired school secretary, was admitted to the DAR chapter. "I wanted to honor my mother and father as well as my black and white heritage," Ferguson said after being admitted. "And I wanted to encourage other black women to embrace their own rich history because we're all Americans." She became chairwoman and founder of the DC DAR Scholarship Committee. Since the mid-1980s, the organization has supported a project to identify the names of African Americans, Native Americans, and individuals of mixed race who are or were patriots of the American Revolution. The 1990s. October 1990 marked the beginning of a year-long celebration of the DAR's centennial anniversary. In 1991, a centennial medallion, Women Worthy of Honor, was presented to 9 living women: Barbara Bush, Sandra Day O'Connor, Admiral Grace M. Hopper, Elizabeth Campbell, Jean Kirkpatrick, Shirley Temple Black, Marian Anderson, Elizabeth Hosington, and Catherine Schaus. Great changes in the DAR administration building began in 1994. The administration building began accepting credit cards, and a fax machine and an electronic filing system were installed. The credential process was automated. Computers for production of the NSDAR application papers were authorized, and the genealogical research system was completed.
The 21st century. 2001 began the renovation of Memorial Continental Hall. After September 11th, a state-of-the-art security system was installed to keep the DAR national headquarters safe and secure. 2002, DAR started digitizing DAR applications and supplements. The Patriot Lookup Service was also established, and the DAR's Public Relations Department was created. The Founders Club was begun in 2005. Supplements which had taken 3.5 years to complete were brought up to date. Copies were made available by computer. In 2007, the DAR was able to finish scanning, digitizing, and adding quality assurance for supporting documentation for membership applications. 2009 was the beginning of the Historic Preservation Committee, Master Questionnaire, and the annual Giving Circle. Famous women who joined between 2000 and 2015: Laura Bush, First Lady, 2001, Bo Derek, actress, 2007, Susan Kilrain, Commander, U.S. Navy, former NASA test pilot and astronaut, 2002. The DAR has continued to grow. We maintain chapters in all 50 states, plus the District of Columbia. There are also DAR chapters within Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Spain, and the United Kingdom. Though the DAR has had their share of controversy, we have come out of it stronger and better, promoting patriotism, preserving American history, and aiding America's future through the betterment of youth education. We raise funds to provide financial aid and educational scholarships to deserving and underprivileged students. Members of the organization also work toward the accurate preservation of history and various historical artifacts. The DAR is home to one of the United States' premier genealogical libraries and displays one of the largest collections of pre-industrial American decorative arts. The organization's annual national meeting, known as the Continental Congress, attracts more than 4,000 members to its Washington, D.C. headquarters each year. Today, we forbid discrimination in membership based on race or creed. We are home to more than 168,000 members worldwide and donate more than 2 million volunteer hours annually. We award more than $150,000 in educational scholarship and financial aid each year.